This is Vernon Madison. In 1985, he was under supervision of a police officer when he shot her twice in the back of the head. Well, after going through 3 trials, he was sentenced to death in 1994. He was expected to be executed in 2016, when the most unexpected situation occurred. Madison suffered from strokes, leading to dementia and memory impairment, due to which he could no longer remember committing the crimes. The case becomes interesting due to the fact that in 1986, the Supreme Court ruled that executing someone who can't understand the reason behind their execution violates the 8th Amendment of the US Constitution, as the amendment states that excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. For Madison, he could not remember the crimes due to his medical issues, thus he wasn't able to understand the reason behind his execution. The case is tricky for the Supreme Court, but it does not stop us to question it philosophically. That can someone who does not remember their actions be morally held responsible for those actions? For the 18th century philosopher, John Locke, the answer was a straight no. In his view, if you can't remember performing a given act, then you are literally not the same person as the person who performed that act. This might sound odd at first, but Locke explains this through his views on personal identity. He states that, which I think is a thinking intelligent being that has reason and reflection, and can consider itself as itself, the same thinking thing in different times and places. This is the forensic notion which shows that a human is not just an intelligent being that can reason and reflect on their actions, but can also think of themselves as persisting and unchanging over time. This is why individuals can plan ahead with a reward or a punishment in mind. So what keeps the individual from changing over time is consciousness, and it is this same consciousness which also distinguishes human identity. Locke asserts that in this alone consists personal identity, i.e. the sameness of rational being, and as far as this consciousness can be extended backwards to any past action or thought, so far reaches the identity of that person. It is the same self now it was then, and 'tis by the same self with this present one that now reflects on it, that action was done. Thus, according to Locke, Madison's perception of reality, that he never committed the crime, is completely accurate, as his consciousness is not the same as the murderer's. Hence morally he is not responsible for the crime, and therefore cannot be punished. To give a radical example of this, we can use the Incredible Hulk and Bruce Banner. For assumption part of things, we can assume that Bruce Banner can transform into Hulk randomly at any time, and when he does, Bruce cannot remember anything about what the Hulk does. Now if Hulk does anything bad like smashing your girl, then can't you blame the poor Bruce? No, of course not. Morally speaking, Bruce cannot be blamed because he doesn't remember smashing your girl. If we change the initial assumptions into that Bruce can control when he turns into Hulk, and knows that Hulk tends to do bad things, then Bruce will share the responsibility of what Hulk does, because he has control over when he can turn into Hulk. Similarly, if you get drunk and know that when you're drunk, you behave really violently, but when you wake up in the morning, you have no recollection of what you did. This does not take the moral responsibility of your actions away just because you had no memory. It is because you already knew the consequences of getting drunk that you are held morally responsible of your actions. You could have declined to drink and watched some good-ass anime, but you refused to do so and still end up getting drunk. John Locke himself gives a similar example through waking and sleeping Socrates. He shows that even if an individual remains the same man, he cannot remain the same person, thus the dichotomy of person and man. He says if the same Socrates waking and sleeping do not partake of the same consciousness, Socrates waking and sleeping is not the same person. And to punish Socrates waking for what sleeping Socrates thought and waking Socrates was never conscious of would be no more right than to punish one twin for what his brother twin did, whereof he knew nothing because their outsides were so alike that they could not distinguish, for such twins have been seen. In contrast, if there is a way to transfer one consciousness to another, then a person remains the same even if the body changes. Ultimately showing how important consciousness is in differentiating between the man and the person. So coming back to the original case of Madison, this tricky case is solved through distinguishing between the direct and derived moral responsibility. For the drunk example, at least you remembered accepting the invitation to a bar and then choosing to drink. Thus this choice is what makes you indirectly responsible for the violent behavior during the drunken hours. However, for Madison, he neither remembers the murder nor the events that led to his dementia. So in Locke's view, Madison is no longer responsible, even without the assumption that Madison is a different person from who committed the crime. In the end, for John Locke, Madison is not guilty, and the Supreme Court agreed to such a conclusion, as it was held that the Eighth Amendment may permit executing a prisoner, even if he or she cannot remember committing his or her crime, but it may prohibit executing a prisoner who suffers from dementia or another disorder rather than psychotic delusions. The court held that if a prisoner is unable to rationally understand the reasons for his sentence, the Eighth Amendment forbids his execution. Although after all this, in February 2020, Madison died while still being held in a correctional facility.